stop scrolling for 5 seconds. Because there is a sentence buried in the rulebook that explains why the silver market can look fine on a screen and still fail in real life. People call it the COMEX kill switch. Not a button, not a conspiracy basement, a clause, a legal lever, and if you own paper silver, minus futures, unallocated, or anything that promises delivery later, you need to understand this before the music stops. Welcome back. Today we are unpacking the $150 trillion lie, why thousands of silver claims can fight for 1 real ounce, and how cash settlement works when delivery becomes impossible. This is not financial advice. This is a mechanics lesson, because the risk is not just price. The risk is the form of settlement. The rumor versus the rulebook. Here is the bridge between conspiracy theory and institutional reality. A rumor says, they will never let silver run, they'll just shut it down. The rulebook says, if delivery or final settlement cannot be completed due to force majeure, the exchange can take action it deems necessary, and that decision is binding. That is the entire psychological shift. It moves the conversation from, would they do it, to, under what conditions are they allowed to do it. Force majeure is defined, in plain language, as a circumstance beyond the control of the parties that prevents delivery, or even prevents the exchange from determining final settlement, as provided for in its rules. Read that again. Prevents delivery, or prevents determining final settlement. This is why I call it a kill switch, because it is a permission structure, how a paper market loses a physical fight. Now let's talk about the 4000 to 1 idea. Do not get stuck on the exact number. Ratios move day to day. The point is leverage. The paper market can create far more claims than there are deliverable ounces ready to leave a vault. Think of it like musical chairs. If there are 4,000 tickets sold for a concert and only 1,000 seats, the box office can look profitable until people show up at the door. In metals, the door is delivery. Most of the time the system works because most people don't demand delivery at the same time. They roll contracts, they net out, they close in cash. That is normal. The problem begins when the market experiences a physical short squeeze, not a price squeeze, a deliverability squeeze. That's when the paper promise meets a warehouse reality. Bars have serial numbers, lead times, shipping schedules, assays, and allocation. A screen does not. What $150 trillion really means, without the hype. When you hear a number like $150 trillion, your brain wants to reject it. It sounds like science fiction. So let's define terms. Notional exposure is not the same as money that will be paid out tomorrow. Notional is the face value of contracts sitting on balance sheets, futures, options, swaps, forwards, leases, unallocated accounts, and all the off-exchange agreements that never show up in a retail app. Banks can net a lot of that internally. They can offset longs and shorts. They can compress positions. But notional still matters because it tells you how big the promise machine is compared to the physical machine. Physical silver is slow. It gets mined, refined, assayed, poured into bars, shipped, insured, stored, and allocated. Paper silver is fast. It gets created with a keystroke. In calm times, paper is a useful tool for hedging and price discovery. In stress times, paper becomes a crowd in a narrow hallway. And the reason silver is special is because it is not just a store of value metal. It is an industrial input, a component, a consumable. Once it goes into electronics, solar, EVs, medical gear, and data centers, a lot of it doesn't come back. So if the world runs a multi-year deficit, it is possible to have a market where price discovery happens in paper, but scarcity happens in atoms. That is how you can have 2 people arguing online. One says silver is down today, the other says I can't source it without a premium, and both can be telling the truth. The clearinghouse is the real main character. Most people think the silver market is a fight between bulls and bears. Wrong. The real fight is between volatility and the clearing system. A futures exchange sits on a simple promise. Every day, gains and losses are settled. Variation margin moves. Accounts are balanced. That daily cash flow is the oxygen. If a price move is violent enough, someone can't pay. If enough someones can't pay, the clearinghouse must either 1. Liquidate positions, 2. Raise margins, 3. Use default resources, or 4. Change the rules of the game to keep the rest of the system alive. This is why, in a crisis, the market can start behaving like a risk committee, because at that point, it is. And once you understand that, the force majeure clause stops sounding like paranoia, it starts sounding like standard operating procedure for survival. Why cash settlement is the real endgame. Here's the part people miss. The exchange does not exist to make you rich. It exists to keep the clearinghouse alive. And when volatility threatens the clearing system, the toolkit is simple. Raise performance bonds, margins, tighten limits, change delivery procedures, and in an extreme disruption, invoke force majeure. When Rule 701 is triggered, it is because delivery or final settlement cannot be completed, and the rule gives senior leadership authority to take the action they deem necessary, binding on all parties. That means in a systemic event, you should not assume the outcome is they must find my silver. You should assume the outcome is they will choose the form of survival. And survival looks like cash. Cash settlement is not a moral failure. It's a contractual outcome. But here is the trap. If the crisis is happening because trust in the currency is breaking, getting paid in that same currency is not a win. It's a refund in melting ice. So the question is not what is the price of silver. The question is what is the settlement unit when the contract is stressed. The two-tier market. Screen price versus street price. You want proof that paper and physical can decouple? Look at the world the way an industrial buyer looks at it. There is the screen price, what the futures market prints, and there is the street price, what it costs to source deliverable metal right now. During tightness, retail premiums explode. Coins that used to be a few dollars over spot can jump to double-digit percentages. Large bars can require lead time, relationships and prepayment. And London adds a second layer of confusion. LBMA publishes vault data showing how much metal is held in London vaults. At the end of December 2025, LBMA reported 27,818 tons of silver held in London vaults, but held is not the same thing as available to satisfy every claim. Metal can be allocated, pledged, leased, or already spoken for in the OTC system. A headline tonnage number does not tell you how many unencumbered bars are free to move. That's the difference between inventory and availability, and that gap is where two-tier markets are born. Why tonners in vaults doesn't end the debate. This is where smart viewers get annoyed and say, hold on, if London reports tens of thousands of tons, how can there be a shortage? Because the market is not a single pile of bars, it's layers of promises on top of bars. In the wholesale world, a huge amount of metal is held through accounts that are effectively credit claims on a pool, not a named bar claim on a specific serial number. In normal times, nobody cares. You buy exposure, you hedge a price, you settle, you move on. In stress times, everybody suddenly cares about the same thing: allocation, specific bars, specific delivery dates, specific ownership. That's the moment a fractional system gets tested, not because the tonnage is fake, because the availability is conditional, and availability is always the first thing to disappear. Think of it like a hotel. A hotel can have 500 rooms, but if 450 of them are already booked for corporate clients, maintenance, renovations and long-stay agreements, the available tonight number can be 20. The building is real, the capacity is real, the available inventory is the bottleneck. Silver is the same. The market can show huge headline holdings, while deliverable supply for marginal buyers tightens sharply. That is why premiums are such a powerful lie detector. Premiums are the market admitting, quietly, that the screen price is not the whole price, the smoking gun hiding in plain sight. ETF disclaimers. If you still think cash settlement is impossible, read the disclaimers in products people treat like physical silver. The iShares Silver Trust Prospectus explicitly warns that demand for silver may exceed available supply acceptable for delivery to the trust, and that authorized participants may be unable to acquire enough silver for new share creation, leading the trust to suspend or restrict creations. That is not a blog rumor, that is a prospectus warning, and it tells you something deeper. Even the most mainstream vehicles admit that physical sourcing can become a bottleneck. So imagine a stress event where industrial demand is front-running supply off-market. Big buyers don't line up at the retail counter. They sign contracts with refiners. They pay for priority. They buy the stream before it ever becomes available to the paper market. If enough metal is pre-allocated upstream, the downstream claims can become IOUs to each other. What a real kill switch event looks like. Let's paint the timeline. Stage 1. Price starts to run. People celebrate. Screens glow green. Stage 2. Margins rise. Volatility spikes. Weak hands are forced out. This is where most rallies die. Stage 3. The strong hands demand delivery anyway. Now it is not a trade. It is a test. Stage 4. Delivery friction shows up. Delays, higher premiums, odd spreads, sudden rule reminders. Nobody says default. They say orderly market. Stage 5. If delivery or settlement truly cannot be completed, force majeure becomes the legal pathway, not to punish you, to prevent the system from breaking in public. Part 6.53 Myths that keep people blind. Myth 1. If I buy a silver contract, someone must hand me silver. Reality. A contract is a rulebook relationship. If the rulebook provides an emergency path when delivery cannot happen, That path exists for a reason. Myth 2. Force majeure means the exchange is committing fraud. Reality. Force majeure is explicitly defined as a circumstance beyond the control of the parties, including things like strikes, blockages, embargoes, government action, and other disruptions, that precludes delivery or settlement. It is a legal framework for dealing with the real world. Myth 3. Cash settlement is fine because dollars are dollars. Reality. Cash settlement is only fine if the system event is not a currency event, but the entire reason people crowd into metals is usually because they don't trust the currency. So a cash-only outcome can be a perfect psychological trap. You think you escaped the system, but the system paid you back in its own unit. How to audit your own exposure without panic. Here are the simplest questions to ask, calmly. Do I own a specific bar, allocated with a serial number, or do I own an account balance, unallocated? If I own a paper product, what does the prospectus say about sourcing metal in extreme demand? If I own a futures position, what is my actual intent, price exposure or physical delivery? You do not need to become a lawyer, you just need to stop assuming that every product that tracks silver is silver. Read the docs, highlight the escape hatches, because in a crisis those escape hatches become the main event, your battle plan. Watch the plumbing, not the headlines. If you want to operate like an adult in this market, stop worshipping the spot price and start watching the plumbing. Here are the signals. Retail premiums, are they compressing or widening? Delivery chatter, are lead times normal or stretched? Spread behavior, do nearby contracts act stressed? Rulebook language, are exchanges issuing special executive reports and emergency reminders? ETF creation activity, are creations smooth or restricted? And one more signal that matters, communication style. In calm markets, exchanges talk about efficiency. In stressed markets, they talk about orderly. Watch for phrases like market integrity, emergency authority, protecting the clearing process, special executive report. Those are not conspiracy words. They are institutional words for, we are managing a problem. If you ever wake up to a headline that sounds like a housekeeping note, temporary measures, revised procedures, exceptional volatility, that is often the prelude to bigger actions, because the kill switch does not arrive as a siren, it arrives as paperwork, and that is why this story matters to Western investors. The legal language is the battlefield. The moment you stop reading it, you give up the advantage. The moment the system chooses cash over metal, the trade changes forever, because the entire purpose of owning silver, for many people, is to exit the paper system. Before we end, remember, this is not a prediction, it's a stress test map. If nothing breaks, great. You learned the plumbing. If something breaks, you won't be shocked by the paperwork. And if you ever hear delivery problem followed by cash alternative, you'll know exactly what chapter you're in. That's how you stay calm while others argue about charts. You watch contracts, clauses and constraints, the real price action, always. Now, when thousands of claims realize the share count is lower than the tickets sold, the banks won't hand you silver out of the vault like a movie scene. They will hand you a check, on time, under the rules, in a currency losing purchasing power. So ask yourself one question tonight. If the squeeze is real, what do you actually own?